What is the essence of trust if a father cannot protect his children from the very hands meant to nurture them? David Okafor stood frozen in his garden, staring at a sight that would forever alter his understanding of betrayal. His twin daughters, barely 7 years old, were bound to the tangerine tree their mother had planted with such hope and dreams. Their small bodies trembled against the rough bark, soaked in sweat and tears, their school uniforms torn and dirty. The rope marks on their tiny wrists told a story he wasn't prepared to hear, yet one he would have to face. In that moment, surrounded by the scent of tangerines and the sound of his daughter's whimpers, David realized that sometimes the greatest danger comes not from strangers, but from those we invite into our sanctuaries. But how did it come to this? How does a man who built an empire from nothing find himself unable to shield his most precious treasures from harm? The answer lies in a love story that began with laughter and ended with unimaginable loss, in choices made from grief and desperation, and in the dangerous territory of second chances. 15 years earlier, the University of Lagos campus buzzed with the electric energy of youth and possibility. David Okafor, a 22-year-old engineering student with dreams bigger than his modest family background, had reluctantly agreed to attend a campus concert only because his roommate threatened to eat his last packet of Indomie if he didn't. He stood at the back of the crowded amphitheater, checking his watch every 5 minutes and calculating how much of study time he was losing. Then he heard her laugh. It wasn't just any laugh. It was the kind that made you stop whatever you were doing and search for its source. Pure joy wrapped in sound, infectious and unguarded. David's eyes scanned the crowd until they found her, 3 rows from the front, clapping enthusiastically as a student band butchered what was supposed to be a cover of a popular song. She had short, natural hair that caught the stage lights, skin that seemed to glow from within, and she was completely, utterly present in the moment. Grace Nwankwo was everything David wasn't. Spontaneous where he was calculated, carefree where he was cautious, vibrant where he often felt invisible. She danced to the amateur music as if it were the best concert she'd ever attended, and when she turned around to share the moment with friends, her eyes met his across the crowd. David later swore to friends that time actually stopped. Grace would laugh and say he was being dramatic, but she admitted that something stirred in her chest when she saw the serious young man with kind eyes watching her with such intensity. She gave him a small wave, and he nearly tripped up over his own feet trying to wave back. "You're staring at that girl like she's the answer to an exam question," his roommate Kemi whispered in his ear. "Maybe she is," David replied, surprising himself with his boldness. When the concert ended, David found himself doing something completely out of character. He pushed through the crowd to find her. Grace was surrounded by friends still laughing about something when he appeared beside her group like a nervous apparition. "Hi," he said, his usually confident voice cracking slightly. "I'm David." "I know who you are," Grace replied with a smile that made his stomach flip. "You're the guy who always sits in the front row of Professor Adebayo's engineering lectures and asks questions that make everyone else feel stupid." "I don't mean to." "Relax," she laughed, touching his arm gently. "It's impressive. I'm Grace, and I sit in the back row of those same lectures, trying not to fall asleep." "You're in engineering too?" "Petroleum engineering. Shocking, I know. People always assume I'm studying something more feminine." Her eyes sparkled with mischief. "Want to walk me back to my hostel? You can tell me about those complicated questions you ask." That walk changed everything. They talked about their dreams, his vision of building something meaningful, her desire to break barriers in the oil industry. They discussed their families, his large, boisterous household in Enugu, where everyone had opinions about his future, her quiet upbringing as an only child with parents who traveled frequently for work. "I was lonely a lot growing up," Grace admitted as they reached her hostel. "My parents loved me, but they were always working, always traveling. I learned early to find joy in small moments, to make my own happiness." I've never been alone long enough to be lonely, David replied. Sometimes I think it might be nice, all that quiet. Trust me, it gets old. What I really want someday is noise. Good noise, children laughing, family dinners with too many voices talking at once, a house full of love and chaos. David smiled. That sounds perfect. From that night forward, they were inseparable. David would save her a seat in the front row of their shared classes, and Grace would make study sessions bearable with her terrible jokes and to explain complex concepts in ways that actually made sense. She brought lightness to his intensity, while he grounded her dreams in practical reality. You know what we should do after graduation? Grace said one evening as they studied in the library. Start a company together. You have the technical brilliance, I have the people skills. We could build something amazing. Are you serious? David looked up from his textbooks, searching her face for any sign of jest. Dead serious. I have been thinking about it for months. We work well together. We complement each other's strengths. Plus, she grinned, I'm tired of other people getting rich off ideas that aren't even as good as ours. That conversation, barely whispered over engineering textbooks, would eventually grow into Okafor and Associates, a consulting firm that would make them both millionaires. But more importantly, it solidified their partnership in every sense of the word. Their wedding took place 6 months after graduation, a joyous celebration that perfectly blended David's large extended family with Grace's smaller but no less loving circle. Grace wore her grandmother's coral beads with a modern white dress, and David couldn't stop grinning long enough to properly recite his vows. The reception featured both traditional Igbo ceremonies and contemporary celebrations, with Grace insisting on a playlist that included everything from high life to hip-hop. Mrs. Okafor, David whispered in her ear as they danced to their first song as husband and wife. I like the sound of that, she replied, then stepped on his foot deliberately. But don't think marriage means I'm going to let you win all our business arguments. Wouldn't dream of it, he laughed, spinning her around as their families cheered. Their early married life was everything they had dreamed. The company grew from a small office in Ikeja to multiple locations across Lagos and Abuja. David's engineering expertise combined with Grace's natural leadership and gift for client relations created a formula for success that seemed unstoppable. They worked side by side during the day and fell into each other's arms each night, planning their future over late dinners and shared dreams. When we have our first baby, Grace would say, rearranging the furniture in what would become the nursery, I want them to grow up knowing they're loved beyond measure. No child of mine will ever feel as lonely as I did. How many children are we talking about exactly? David would tease, but his eyes were serious. He wanted that noise Grace had talked about too, the beautiful chaos of a house full of their children. At least 4, she'd reply confidently, maybe 6. I want them to have what I never had, siblings, constant companionship, a house that's never quiet. But months turned into years, and the nursery remained empty. At first, they weren't worried. They were young, successful, deeply in love. Surely children would come when the time was right. But after 3 years of hoping, of timing, of casual conversations with doctors who assured them everything would happen naturally, worry began to creep in. Grace started taking pregnancy tests obsessively, each negative result chipping away at her natural optimism. David would find her crying in the bathroom at odd hours, and his heart would break a little more each time. Oh my God. Maybe we're trying too hard, he'd say, pulling her into his arms. Maybe we should take a vacation, relax, let it happen naturally. It should have happened naturally by now, Grace would reply, her voice thick with tears. David, what if I can't give you children? What if I'm broken somehow? You're not broken, he'd insist firmly, and even if we never have children, I have everything I need right here with you. But even as he said the words, David knew they weren't entirely true. Not because he loved Grace any less, but because he could see how desperately she needed to be a mother. Her loneliness as a child had created a deep well of love that she needed to pour into her own babies. Watching her suffer month after month was agony. By their 5th year of marriage, they had tried everything: fertility specialists, traditional medicine, prayer sessions with various pastors, even a trip to India for alternative treatments that cost a fortune and yielded nothing but false hope. Grace had become a shadow of her former joyful self, going through the motions of their successful life while her heart remained focused on the one thing that seemed impossible to achieve. "I see pregnant women everywhere now," she told David one evening after another failed round of IVF. "It's like the universe is mocking me. Yesterday, our teenage house help mentioned she might be pregnant, and I had to excuse myself to cry in the bathroom. What kind of woman am I?" "You're the strongest woman I know," David replied, meaning every word, "and the most loving. Any child would be lucky to have you as their mother." But what if no child ever gets that chance? It was their 7th year of marriage when everything changed. Grace had stopped taking pregnancy tests, stopped tracking her cycle, stopped hoping. She had thrown herself into work with renewed vigor, expanding their company into new markets and territories as if success could fill the emptiness where motherhood was supposed to be. "I think I have food poisoning," she told David one morning, rushing to the bathroom for the 3rd time in an hour. "Maybe you should see a doctor," he suggested, but she waved him off. "It's probably something I ate at that client dinner yesterday. You know how my stomach is." But the food poisoning persisted for days. It was their longtime family doctor, Dr. Williams, who finally suggested what neither of them dared to consider. "Grace, when was your last period?" The blood test results came back on a Thursday afternoon. David was in a client meeting when Grace burst through his office door, tears streaming down her face and a piece of paper clutched in her trembling hands. "David," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "David, I'm pregnant." The room fell silent. David's clients looked confused as he stood up slowly, his face cycling through disbelief, joy, and something approaching religious awe. Are you sure?" Grace nodded, unable to speak. David crossed the room in 3 strides and lifted her off the ground, spinning her around as they both laughed and cried simultaneously. "Excuse me, gentlemen," David said to his bewildered clients without taking his eyes off his wife. "We'll have to reschedule. My wife and I are having a baby." That night, they called everyone they knew. David's mother screamed so loudly through the phone that Grace could hear her from across the room. Grace's parents, reached at a conference in South Africa, wept openly on a video call. Friends who had watched them struggle for years rejoiced as if it were their own miracle. 7 years, Grace whispered as they lay in bed that night, her hand pressed flat against her still flat stomach. 7 years of waiting, and now there's a little person in there. "Our little person," David corrected, covering her hand with his. "I can't believe it's real." "What if something goes wrong?" "What if—" "Nothing will go wrong," David said firmly. "This baby has been waiting 7 years to meet us." "They're not going anywhere." He was right at first. The pregnancy progressed beautifully. Grace bloomed in a way that made David fall in love with her all over again. Her natural radiance returned tenfold, and she attacked preparing for motherhood with the same enthusiasm she brought to everything else. The nursery was painted and repainted 3 times until it was perfect. They interviewed nannies, researched pediatricians, and read every pregnancy book they could find. "I think it's a girl," Grace announced one evening during her 4th month, looking up from yet another baby name book. "What makes you so sure?" "Mother's intuition. And look at this." She showed him an ultrasound photo. "See how she's positioned? Very ladylike. Our daughter is already showing good manners." David laughed, but privately he hoped Grace was right. He pictured a little girl with Grace's laugh and fearless spirit, maybe his stubborn determination. A daughter who would never know a day of loneliness because she would be so thoroughly loved. It was during Grace's 5th month that their world shifted again. but this time in a direction they could never have anticipated. Grace had been complaining of headaches for weeks, attributing them to pregnancy hormones and work stress. But when she collapsed during a client presentation, David knew something was seriously wrong. Dr. Williams's face was grave when he met them at the hospital. After hours of tests and scans, he sat them down in his office with the careful demeanor of a man about to shatter someone's world. "Grace, the MRI shows a mass in your brain, a tumor." The words hung in the air like smoke after a fire, visible and choking and impossible to clear away. Grace's hand found David's and gripped it so tightly he could feel her pulse through her fingertips. "What kind of tumor?" David's voice sounded foreign to his own ears. "It's malignant, and it's advanced. The pregnancy hormones have accelerated its growth significantly." Dr. Williams's kind eyes were filled with sorrow. "I'm going to refer you to an oncologist, but I need to prepare you. This is a very serious situation." The oncologist, Dr. Henderson, was a small woman with gentle hands in the kind of straightforward honesty that felt both cruel and necessary. She showed them the scans, pointing to the dark mass that had invaded Grace's brain like an unwelcome visitor who refused to leave. "Surgery isn't an option at this stage," she explained. "The tumor is too integrated with critical brain tissue. Chemotherapy and radiation are possibilities, but..." She paused, her eyes moving to Grace's rounded belly. "Not while you're pregnant." "What are you saying?" Grace's voice was steady, but David could see the fear in her eyes. "I'm saying that continuing this pregnancy significantly reduces your chances of survival. The hormones feeding the baby are also feeding the tumor. Every week you remain pregnant decreases the time we have to fight this aggressively." David felt the world tilt sideways. What are our options? Terminate the pregnancy immediately and begin treatment. Even then, we're looking at advanced stage cancer. But without termination, Dr. Henderson's silence spoke volumes. Grace's hand moved to her belly, protective and instinctive. "How much time do I have if I continue the pregnancy?" "Grace," David started, but she held up her hand. "How much time, doctor?" Dr. Henderson sighed. 6 months, maybe 8 if we're very lucky. The pregnancy will reduce your life expectancy by approximately 70%. The drive home was silent except for the sound of Lagos traffic and Grace's quiet crying. David's mind raced through possibilities, alternatives, miracles that might exist somewhere outside of medical reality. When they finally reached their house, the beautiful home they had built together, now filled with baby furniture and dreams that seemed suddenly fragile, Grace turned to him with a resolve that both inspired and terrified him. "I'm keeping the baby." "Grace, you heard what the doctor said." "I heard her." Grace's voice was calm but unmovable. "David, we waited 7 years for this child. 7 years of hoping and praying and believing that someday we would be parents. I'm not giving that up now." "You could die." The words came out harsh and desperate. "Grace, you could die, and then I lose both of you. And if I terminate this pregnancy, I lose the only chance I may ever have to be a mother. Even if the treatment works, even if I survive, the chemotherapy will destroy any chance of future pregnancies. This is it, David. This is our only shot at the family we've dreamed of." That night marked the beginning of the most difficult months of their marriage. David researched every possible treatment, consulted doctors around the world, even investigated experimental treatments that existed only in medical trials. He was willing to spend every naira they had, sell the company, mortgage their future, anything to find a solution that would save both Grace and their baby. But Grace had made her decision with the same determination that had built their business empire. She was keeping their child regardless of the cost to herself. "You don't understand," she tried to explain during one of their many tearful arguments. "I've been lonely my entire life until you. The only thing that made it bearable was the hope that someday I would have children who would never feel that emptiness. This baby is that hope made real. I can't destroy it, even to save myself." "What about my hope?" David shouted, his careful composure finally cracking. "What about my hope of growing old with you? Of watching you raise our children? Of having decades together instead of months?" "David, please." "No, Grace, I love you more than any hypothetical future. I love you more than dreams of children or perfect families or any of that. I love you, the woman standing right here, right now, and I'm begging you not to leave me." It was the first real fight of their marriage, and it ended with David storming out of the house and spending the night in his office. He sat at his desk until dawn, alternating between rage at the unfairness of it all and terror at the thought of losing Grace. When he finally drove home the next morning, he found her in the nursery, sitting in the rocking chair they had picked out together, one hand on her growing belly. "I'm sorry I yelled," he said from the doorway. "I'm scared of losing you. Babies can wait. I can't lose you." Grace looked up at him with tears in her eyes but iron in her voice. "These little ones inside me can't wait. They're here now, David, and I'm going to finish this journey with or without you." The little one's revelation had come during Grace's 6th month. Not one baby, but twins. 2 heartbeats on the monitor, 2 tiny forms moving and growing despite the darkness threatening their mother's life. David cried when he saw the ultrasound, overwhelmed by joy and terror in equal measure. "Girls," the technician announced with a smile. "2 beautiful baby girls." Grace squeezed David's hand. "Our daughters." David were having daughters. From that moment forward, David threw his complete support behind Grace's decision. If she was determined to see this through, he would be beside her every step of the way. They hired the best maternal fetal medicine specialists, arranged for round-the-clock care, and prepared for the possibility that Grace might not survive the delivery. "What do you want to name them?" David asked one evening as they watched Grace's belly move with tiny elbows and knees. "Hope and faith," Grace replied without hesitation. "Because that's what got us here, and that's what they'll need when I'm gone." "Don't talk like that." "David, we have to be realistic. I need to know that you'll take care of our girls with everything you have. Promise me that." "I promise," he whispered, his voice breaking. "But you're going to be here to help me." Grace smiled sadly. "I hope so. But if I'm not, find them a mother who will love them as much as I do. Don't let them grow up feeling alone like I did." The final months were both beautiful and heartbreaking. Grace grew weaker as the babies grew stronger, her body sacrificing itself to nourish the lives within her. David watched helplessly as the vibrant woman he married became fragile and ethereal, held together by sheer willpower and love for their unborn children. At 8 months, Grace collapsed during breakfast. The seizure was violent and terrifying, and David knew even as he called for the ambulance that their time had run out. "We need to deliver the babies now, doctor," Henderson explained in the harsh fluorescent light of the hospital corridor. "Grace's body can't sustain this much longer." David held Grace's hand as they prepared her for surgery. Her eyes were cloudy from medication, but her grip was still strong. "Take care of our babies with everything you have," she whispered, echoing her earlier plea. "Thank you for making me the happiest woman on earth." Those were the last words she ever spoke to him. Hope and Faith Okafor entered the world at 3:47 and 3:49 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, tiny but perfect, their cries filling the delivery room with the sound of life triumphing over loss. Grace never got to hold them. The tumor, no longer held in check by her fierce determination, claimed her before she could wake up from the anesthesia. David held his daughters for the first time while his wife's body lay cooling in the next room, and he understood for the first time what Grace meant about finishing the journey. These babies were her final gift to him, her love made manifest in 2 perfect little beings who would carry her spirit forward. The funeral was surreal. David stood at Grace's graveside with 2 newborns in his arms, surrounded by hundreds of people who had loved her and felt utterly alone. His mother moved in temporarily to help with the babies, but even surrounded by family, David was drowning in grief. "You need to talk to someone," his mother said one evening, finding him staring at Grace's photo while the twins slept. "This grief is eating you alive." The therapy helped eventually. Dr. Roberts was a kind woman who helped David understand that grief and love could exist simultaneously, that honoring Grace's memory meant living fully for their daughters. Slowly, day by day, David began to function again. Hope and faith were everything Grace had predicted, feisty, intelligent, and absolutely devoted to each other. They had Grace's laugh and David's stubborn streak, and they filled the house with exactly the kind of noise Grace had dreamed of. By their third birthday, David had found his rhythm as a single father, juggling work and parenting with help from a reliable nanny and his extended family. But the loneliness crept in during quiet moments. When the girls were asleep and the house fell silent, David felt Grace's absence like a physical ache. He missed having a partner to share the small victories and daily struggles of parenthood. He missed adult conversation, missed the way Grace used to challenge his ideas and make him laugh. It was at Hope and Faith's 4th birthday party that David reconnected with Sarah Adebayo, Grace's former roommate from university. Sarah had been wonderful during Grace's illness, bringing meals and offering support without being asked. She was a pediatric nurse, divorced with no children of her own, and the twins adored her. "Auntie Sarah," they squealed when she arrived at the party, running to hug her legs with the enthusiasm only 4-year-olds could muster. "Look how big you've grown," Sarah exclaimed, scooping them both up. "I swear you have each grown a foot since I saw you last month." David watched the interaction with something stirring in his chest. Sarah was good with his daughters, patient and playful in a way that reminded him of Grace's natural ease with children. More importantly, she understood their family's history without needing explanation. After the party, as Sarah helped clean up, David found himself really talking to another adult for the first time in months. "They're amazing girls," Sarah said, packing leftover cake into containers. "Grace would be so proud of who they're becoming." "Some days I feel like I'm failing them," David admitted. "They need a mother figure, someone who understands girl things and can teach them what I can't." Sarah paused in her cleaning. "David, you're an incredible father. But you're right that they need feminine influence. Have you thought about, would you ever consider dating again?" David finished the question she couldn't quite ask. "I think about it, but it's complicated. Any woman I bring into their lives has to understand that Grace will always be part of our story. And the girls, they deserve someone who will love them completely, not compete with their mother's memory." "Grace and I talked about that once," Sarah said quietly, "when she was sick. She made me promise that if anything happened to her, I would make sure you and the girls were okay. She said you'd probably try to handle everything alone, but that the girls needed a mother's love." David looked at her with new eyes. "Shra, are you saying?" "I'm saying that I've loved those girls since they were born. I've loved watching you become the father Grace knew you could be. And if you're open to it, I'd like to try being more than just Auntie Sarah." Their courtship was gentle and careful, built on friendship and shared love for hope and faith rather than passionate romance. David found comfort in Sarah's steady presence, her easy laughter, and the way she slipped seamlessly into their family routines. The girls were thrilled when David explained that Auntie Sarah might become their new mommy. "Will she live here forever and ever?" Hope asked, bouncing on her bed. "Can she make pancakes like Mommy Grace used to?" Faith added practically. "She can learn," David laughed. "Would you like that?" Both girls nodded enthusiastically. To them, Sarah wasn't a replacement for the mother they had never known, but an addition to their family that felt natural and right. The wedding was small and simple, held in their backyard under the tangerine tree Grace had planted years earlier. Hope and Faith served as flower girls, giggling as they scattered petals along the makeshift aisle. David's vows were heartfelt but measured. He promised to love and honor Sarah, to build a new chapter of their family story together. For 6 months, everything seemed perfect. Sarah moved into their home with minimal disruption, taking over morning routines and bedtime stories with practiced ease. She helped with homework, planned elaborate tea parties, and taught the girls to braid each other's hair. David felt a weight lifting from his shoulders as he watched his daughters bask in the maternal attention they had been missing. But slowly, subtly, things began to change. It started with the small comments. "David, don't you think the girls are a bit too dependent on you?" Sarah would ask after he spent Saturday afternoon playing with them instead of watching football. "It's not healthy for children to monopolize their father's time. They're just excited to have family time," David would reply, confused by her sudden concern. "We've always done Saturday activities together." "That was before you had a wife to consider," Sarah would counter, her voice carrying an edge that hadn't been there during their courtship. "I need attention too, David. I need to feel like I matter in this family." David tried to balance both needs, planning date nights with Sarah while maintaining his special traditions with the girls. But nothing seemed to satisfy Sarah's growing resentment. She began to complain that the house was too focused on the twins, that Grace's photos made her feel like an outsider, that David's devotion to his daughters was excessive. When Sarah became pregnant 8 months after their wedding, David hoped a child of her own would ease her jealousy toward Hope and Faith. Instead, it seemed to amplify her need to secure her son's position in the family hierarchy. "We need to talk about the business," Sarah said one evening when she was 7 months pregnant. "When little David is born, I want to make sure his inheritance is protected." "His inheritance?" David looked up from helping the twins with their homework. "Sarah, all my children will be provided for equally." "But the girls they're not really your only children anymore," Sarah said carefully. "This baby will be your son, your heir." "Doesn't that mean something special?" "It means I'll have 3 children instead of 2, David replied firmly, "all of whom I love equally." Sarah's face tightened with frustration, but she said nothing more. David dismissed the conversation as pregnancy hormones and stress, not recognizing it as the first volley in a war for his daughter's place in their own home. After little David was born, Sarah's behavior toward Hope and Faith changed dramatically. Gone was the playful, loving woman who had made them feel cherished. In her place was someone cold and calculating, someone who saw 2 7-year-old girls as obstacles to her son's future. The changes were subtle at first. Sarah would forget to pack the girls' lunches, leaving them hungry at school. She would schedule David's business meetings during important school events, ensuring he missed their performances and presentations. When the girls came to her with problems or excitement, she would brush them off with distracted responses, saving her enthusiasm for her infant son. "Daddy," Faith said one evening as David tucked them into bed, "why doesn't Mommy Sarah like us anymore?" "What do you mean, sweetheart?" David asked, though he had begun to notice Sarah's coolness toward his daughters. "She's different," Hope explained. "She used to play with us and help with our hair, but now she only wants to be with baby David." "She's just tired from taking care of a newborn," David explained, making excuses he wasn't sure he believed. "Things will get better when he's older." But things didn't get better. They got worse. Sarah began assigning the girls household chores that were far beyond their age and capability. When they couldn't complete tasks to her satisfaction, she would punish them by withholding meals or sending them to bed early. She fired their longtime nanny, claiming the family couldn't afford the expense, leaving the girls in her care during David's work hours. "The girls seem thin," David's mother observed during a family visit. "Are they eating enough?" "Children go through phases," Sarah replied smoothly. "They're probably just growing." But David began to notice other things. Hope and Faith, once chatty and exuberant, had become quiet and cautious around Sarah. They flinched when she raised her voice, and they seemed to walk on eggshells in their own home. When David asked them about it directly, they would exchange worried glances and insist everything was fine. "We don't want it to make you sad, Daddy," Faith explained when he pressed them. "You're happy with Mommy Sarah and baby David." "We don't want to ruin that." The truth was, David had been so focused on making his new marriage work and managing his business that he had failed to see what was happening right under his nose. He was away more frequently now, trusting Sarah to care for all three children while he handled client meetings and business development. He came home to carefully stage scenes of domestic harmony, Sarah feeding the baby while the twins played quietly nearby, everyone smiling when he walked through the door. What he didn't see were the hours of verbal abuse, the impossible chores, the meals withheld as punishment for minor infractions. He didn't see his daughter scrubbing floors until their small hands were raw, or standing in corners for hours as punishment for imagined slights against their baby brother. He didn't see Sarah's cruel smile when she told them their father loved his new family more than his old one, or the way she threatened them with foster care if they dared to complain. The breaking point came on a Tuesday in March. David was supposed to be in Abuja for 3 days of client meetings, but a canceled flight brought him home a day early. He decided to surprise his family, parking outside the gate instead of pulling into the driveway so he could sneak in through the garden entrance. The sight that greeted him would be seared into his memory forever. Hope and Faith, still in their school uniforms, were tied with rope to the tangerine tree their mother had planted with such love and hope. The rope was tight around their small wrists and ankles, binding them to the trunk like prisoners. Their faces were streaked with tears and dirt, their uniforms torn and stained. They had clearly been there for hours, judging by the way they slumped against their bonds in exhaustion. David's briefcase fell from his numb fingers as he rushed to them, his heart pounding with a mixture of rage and horror that threatened to consume him entirely. Hope, Faith. He was beside them in seconds, his hands shaking as he worked to untie the cruel knots. What happened? Who did this to you? Daddy? Hope's voice was hoarse from crying. You're home early. We tried to be good, Faith whispered. We tried so hard, but she said we were bad, and baby David was crying and… Shh, it's okay, David soothed, finally freeing them from their bonds. He gathered both girls into his arms, feeling their thin bodies shake against his chest. You're safe now. Daddy's here. Don't tell Mommy Sarah we told you, Hope pleaded. She said if we ever told on her, she would send us away and you would let her because you love baby David more than us. David's vision went white with rage. In 8 years of marriage to Grace and 3 years of single parenthood, he had never felt such overwhelming fury. Someone had hurt his children, tortured them, terrorized them, made them afraid in their own home, and that someone was the woman he had trusted with their care. You will never be sent away, he told his daughters fiercely. You are my heart, my everything. No one will ever hurt you again. David carried both girls into the house, his mind spinning with disbelief and murderous anger. He found Sarah exactly where he expected. Lounging on the living room sofa, watching television while baby David slept peacefully in his carrier beside her, she looked up when David entered, and her face went pale when she saw the twins in his arms. David, you're home early, she stammered, scrambling to sit up straighter. I wasn't expecting… Where were you planning to tell me you tied my daughters to a tree like animals? David's voice was deadly quiet, more terrifying than any shout. Sarah's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. They were misbehaving, and I needed to teach them. They're 7 years old. David's control finally snapped, his voice echoing through the house. They're 7-year-old children, and you tied them to a tree. What kind of monster does that? David, please, let me explain. Explain what? Explain how you've been abusing my daughters while I was at work? Explain how you've been starving them and terrorizing them and making them afraid to tell me because they don't want to upset their father's happiness. Sarah's face crumpled as she realized the extent of what had been discovered. David, I never meant for it to go this far, but they're so difficult, and with the baby, I just couldn't handle. Get out. David's words were ice cold and final. Pack whatever you can carry and get out of my house. but the baby stays here." "What?" Sarah's face went white. "David, you can't take my son from me." "He's my son too," David replied with steel in his voice. "And unlike you, I would never abandon my child. You've proven you're unfit to care for children. Baby David stays with his sisters and me. David, please, we can work this out, but I'm not leaving without my baby." "You lost the right to make demands when you tortured my daughters," David cut her off. He picked up his phone and dialed. "Security? I need you at the house immediately. I have someone who needs to be escorted off the property." Sarah lunged for the baby carrier, but David stepped between her and his son. "Don't make this worse than it already is, Sarah. Leave now with some dignity intact, or leave in handcuffs. Your choice. You can't do this. I'm his mother. This is kidnapping. I'm his father, and I have every legal right to protect my child from an abusive parent. The CCTV footage of what you did to Hope and Faith will ensure no judge questions my decision." When security arrived, Sarah was still pleading, tears streaming down her face as she reached for her baby one last time. "Please, David, don't take him from me. I'll change, I'll get help. I'll never hurt the girls again." "You should have thought of that before you tied 7-year-old children to a tree," David replied coldly. "Goodbye, Sarah." As security escorted the sobbing woman from the premises, David looked down at his infant son, sleeping peacefully despite the chaos around him. Baby David was innocent in all of this, and David would make sure he grew up knowing love and security, just like his sisters. As Sarah packed frantically under security supervision, alternating between the tears and threats, David sat with his daughters and listened to the full story of their months of suffering. The picture that emerged was even worse than he had imagined. Systematic, psychological, and physical abuse designed to break their spirits and secure Sarah's son's position as the favorite child. "She said Mommy Grace didn't really love us," Faith whispered. "She said that's why Mommy Grace died, because she didn't want to take care of us." David's heart shattered. "That's not true, baby girl. Mommy Grace loved you so much that she gave her life to bring you into this world. She wanted you more than anything in the universe. She said you were going to send us to live with Grandmama permanently," Hope added. "She said new daddies don't want old children." "I will never, ever send you away," David promised, holding them closer. "You are my daughters, my heart, my everything. No one will ever separate us again." That evening, David gathered Hope and Faith in the living room and explained what would happen next. "Baby David is going to stay with us," he told them gently. "He's your brother, and this is his home too. Are you okay with that?" The twins exchanged one of their telepathic glances before Hope spoke up. "It's not baby David's fault that his mommy was mean to us, and he needs someone to take care of him," Faith added practically. "We can help." David's heart swelled with pride. Even after everything they had endured, his daughter's first instinct was compassion. Grace would have been so proud. That night, as he tucked Hope and Faith into bed in his own room, they were too frightened to sleep alone. After the day's trauma, David made them a series of promises. "First, I will never leave you alone with anyone I don't trust completely. Second, I will never put work before your safety and happiness again. Third, if anyone ever hurts you or makes you feel unsafe, you can tell me immediately without worrying about my feelings." "What if it makes you sad?" Hope asked. "Your safety is more important than my sadness," David replied firmly. "My job is to protect you always." The next morning, David did something revolutionary. He moved his office into his home permanently. He converted the guest room into a workspace where he could handle all his business affairs while remaining available to his children every moment of every day. Within days, he had hired a team of vetted nannies to help care for all 3 children, ensuring they would never again be left vulnerable to abuse. "Are you sure about this?" his business partner asked during a video call. "You're the face of this company, David. Clients expect to meet with you personally." "My clients will have to understand that my children come first," David replied. "If they can't accept video conferences and phone meetings, they can find another consulting firm. Surprisingly, most clients were not only understanding but impressed by David's dedication to his family. His reputation grew as a man who had his priorities straight, and business actually improved as word spread about his integrity and values. David also insisted on therapy for both girls, helping them process the trauma they had endured. Dr. Mitchell was a gentle child psychologist who specialized in abuse recovery, and she helped Hope and Faith understand that what had happened to them was not their fault. Children sometimes blame themselves when adults behave badly, Dr. Mitchell explained during one of their family sessions. But Hope and Faith, you were perfect children doing your best in a difficult situation. The problem was never with you. Slowly, gradually, the girls began to heal. Their laughter returned, then growing stronger each day. They started bringing friends home from school again, secure in the knowledge that their father would be there to greet them. They began to talk about their mother Grace with joy instead of sadness, sharing memories Sarah had tried to taint. And baby David thrived under his father's care and his sister's gentle attention. The twins took their role as big sisters seriously, helping with feedings and entertaining him with silly songs and games. David watched with amazement as his three children formed their own special bond, united by their father's unwavering love and protection. "Daddy," Faith said one evening as they worked together at a jigsaw puzzle, while baby David played on his blanket nearby, "do you think Mommy Grace would be proud of us?" "I think she would be amazed by how strong and brave you've both been," David replied. "And I think she would be grateful that you saved each other." "What do you mean?" Hope looked up from sorting puzzle pieces. "I mean that when things were scary and hard, you took care of each other. You protected each other. That's what Mommy Grace wanted most, for you to never be alone." 6 months after Sarah's removal from their home, David received legal papers demanding custody of baby David. He was surprised to find that his main emotion was not anger, but determination to protect his son from an unstable mother. "She has no legal standing," his lawyer assured him. "Given the documented abuse and the fact that you're the child's father providing a stable home environment, custody will remain with you. The CCTV footage you provided ensures she won't get unsupervised access." David had indeed pulled all the security footage from their home system, and what he found there had been sickening. Hours of Sarah's cruelty toward Hope and Faith, documented in crystal clear detail. The footage would ensure that all three children remained safely in his custody. But David found that victory in court was less important to him than healing his family. He settled the legal matters quietly, ensuring Sarah could have supervised visitation with baby David while maintaining firm boundaries to protect all his children. "Are you sad about baby David's mommy?" Hope asked one day, having overheard a phone conversation with the lawyers. "I'm sad that she chose to hurt people instead of love them," David replied honestly. "But baby David has us now, and we'll make sure he grows up knowing what real love looks like." "Will you ever get married again?" Faith wanted to know. David considered the question carefully. "Maybe someday if I meet someone who loves all three of you as much as I do. Someone who understands that we're a package deal and that your happiness comes first." "What if we never want you to marry anyone?" Hope asked. "Then I won't," David replied simply. "I'd rather be single forever than risk putting any of you in danger again." As Hope and Faith grew older, they became David's closest advisors on matters of the heart. When women expressed interest in dating him, the girls had an uncanny ability to sense whether their intentions were genuine or self-serving. "That lady who came to dinner last week," Faith announced when she was 10, "she kept trying to send us to our rooms so she could be alone with you. And she asked weird questions about how much money you make," Hope added. "She didn't ask us anything about school or our friends or what we like to do. She didn't even notice that baby David had learned to walk." David learned to trust his daughter's instincts completely. They had developed a radar for people who saw them as obstacles rather than blessings, and their judgment was invariably accurate. Years passed peacefully. David's business thrived under his new family-first approach. Hope and Faith grew into confident, compassionate young women who understood both the fragility and strength of family bonds. Little David grew up surrounded by love, unaware that his biological mother had ever been a threat to their family's happiness. To him, hope and faith weren't half-sisters, but simply his beloved big sisters who taught him to ride a bike, helped with his homework, and protected him from playground bullies. "You know what I want to be when I grow up?" Faith announced during her 14th birthday dinner. Baby David, now a rambunctious 6-year-old, sitting between his sisters. "What's that, sweetheart?" "A child psychologist like Dr. Mitchell. I want to help kids who go through what we went through." "And I want to be a lawyer," Hope added. "I want to make sure people like Sarah can't hurt children and get away with it." "What about me?" little David piped up. "What should I be?" "You can be anything you want, little brother." Faith ruffled his hair affectionately. "But whatever you choose, we'll always have your back." David smiled, recognizing Grace's compassionate spirit and fierce protective instincts in all his children. "Your mother would be so proud of the people you're all becoming." "Tell the story again, Daddy," little David demanded, "about how Mommy Grace was brave and gave us life." As David retold the story of Grace's courage and sacrifice, watching his 3 children listen with rapt attention under the gentle glow of their living room lights, he felt a peace he hadn't known in years. Looking out at the tangerine tree that had once been a symbol of terror and was now, once again, a symbol of hope and growth, David realized that Grace's final gift hadn't just been their daughters' lives. It had been the strength to protect those lives, the wisdom to prioritize what mattered most, and the courage to trust again, carefully, selectively, but genuinely. "What do you think, Grace?" he whispered to the photograph on his nightstand that evening, after all 3 children had gone to bed. "Did we do okay?" In the gentle evening breeze that rustled the leaves of the tangerine tree outside his window, David could almost hear her laughing with joy and pride. They had done more than okay. They had survived, they had healed, and they had built something beautiful from the ashes of tragedy. And in the end, that was exactly what Grace had asked for him to take care of their babies with everything he had, and to make sure they never felt alone. Now baby David was part of that promise too, safe and loved alongside his sisters. Mission accomplished. Thank you for watching. What do you think of this story? Let me know of your thoughts in the comment section below. Until I bring another intriguing story your way again, bye for now.